Okay, so we're continuing getting started, and in this series of brief lectures, we'll talking about religion, which is an interesting thing because a lot of folks in their day-to-day lives going about and talking about their faith or sharing religion with other people do so unknowingly incorrectly. So one of the first things that we need to touch upon is that when we talk about religion, we do so using, and this is the big word of the day, the phenomenological approach. So you can say it with me, phenomenological. And you might be saying to yourself, what is the phenomenological approach? And that is a discussion of religion that avoids if a faith is true or valid, and instead observes and describes. In other words, using the phenomenological approach, and that's what we'll be using in this class, so please be sure to use that in the forums and the different writings. We're not interested in proving or disproving if a religion is the one true faith. And instead, we have to remember that we're students, and we're interested in observing and describing the different phenomena that encompass a religion. So what is not the phenomenological approach? Passing judgment, saying a religion is right and true. We're not interested in any of that. So please be sure to do that. Please be sure to remember that as we're using the phenomenological approach. So now what everybody to do is to imagine a society. And that society is depicted here by this blank sheet of paper. Now what happens naturally over time is that groups of people come together and form what we will call church. And this is using the word church in a generic sense. So what a church is, it's a religious community that invites other members of society to join. So that means that the people in Blue Circle Church as well as the people in Green Circle Church are going out into neighborhoods, contacting people at work as they bump into them in the hallway and saying, hey, do you go to church? I want you to come to church with me. And the reason for that is that they're concerned for the well-being of society. In other words, when you do that, when you bump into somebody and you invite them to come to church with you, well-being, you don't want them to go to hell. Exactly right. You want them to live a better life, and that better life is your claim to be the holder of religious truth. So this is what we mean by church. And it's natural for human beings to form a church. So in this imaginary society, we can see that we have two churches that have formed. Now continue the development, we see that it's also natural for a sect to form. S-E-C-T, sect. And what happens with a sect, they usually evolve, develop, grow from an established church. And what happens is that the people of a church start to, it's like almost like a clique. You could think about it like that. There'll be a church and then there'll be a clique inside of that church. And the members of that clique they'll still have this same core set of beliefs, but they'll start to pick up some additional beliefs. They'll demand more conformity of themselves, and they're exclusive in membership because they're largely unconcerned with society. So when that happens, that clique gets tighter and tighter and tighter until it pops off and forms a sect. So as we can see here, what happened in Blue Circle Church is that sect kind of split off like a slice of pizza while Green Circle Church, oh my goodness, something really crazy happened there. It almost cleaved in two. Now, an example of a sect would be the Amish. Amish are Christians, but they demand more conformity. And if you're familiar with the Amish, that conformity that they demand is you cannot use electricity, all these strappings of modernity that we surround ourselves with these different parts of technology. That's what they demand. In addition, the Amish will never come up to you and share their faith because they're unconcerned with society at large. So that is a sect. And the Amish is the perfect example of a sect. And there's other sects around there. The reason why most people don't know about these different sects that are around is that one point that we just touched upon is they're unconcerned with society. They're not going around and sharing the gospel message with the community. Now, this next word, denomination, is one that a lot of people are unfamiliar with or they use incorrectly. And a synonym for denomination is movement. So what can happen is a denomination can form from a sect if the members of the original church overcome their differences with the people of the sect. So then what would happen is that the people in the sect that split off start to talk to the people of the church that they were once members of, and they realize that they have more in common than they do different. So then what happens is that they merge back together. And they only have a few different, teachings that are different. And that's what's called a denomination. And this is what happened with the Christian church. The Christian church, during the Renaissance, experienced a Reformation. And that was led by a German monk. His name is Martin Luther. And at this time, there was just one church, and churches didn't have names. And by names, I mean Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Episcopalian, Church of Christ, Church of God, Amy Zion, all that stuff. Churches didn't have names like that. But then, Martin Luther was upset with some of the practices of the Christian church. At that time, it had gotten really, really greedy, centered on money. So he started to complain, and his complaints reached the Pope, and the Pope told him, "I'm the Pope, I run the show." And Martin Luther didn't like that, didn't like that there was no changes being made to stop the bad things going on in the church. So then he broke off from the church and started his own church. And when this happened, he started the Protestant Reformation. And if you look at the word Protestant, you can write it down. It has the root word protest. And Reformation, the root word is reform. And this is what the Protestant Reformation was all about. Protesting the greediness of the church, and they wanted to reform it and take all that stuff out. So then churches had names. And this is when we get names such as Catholic, Lutheran, all these different names. And the church that Martin Luther started, we call that the Lutheran Church. And the church that he broke away from today, we call the Catholic or the Roman Catholic Church. Now, all of these are different denominations of the Christian church. And there's a whole bunch of different denominations. If you want to do a quick little Google homework, you can Google how many Protestant denominations are there. And these are all the outcomes of what Martin Luther did when he started the Protestant Reformation and started all these different denominations. And in case you're curious, this has happened with all the different religions. It's not just Christianity, but all the different ones. And these are called movements as well as denominations. I know it's really fascinating. And this lecture, we've hit the 10-minute mark, so we're going to pick back up the next one.